She'll right past I think both lines changeover.
Okay. Hey. Yeah. So they had it at 3. So I went to the doctor on Thursday. She's like, and then when I'm just setting like this right here, my oxygen level is okay. They're gonna get me another CAT scan in February. Right. When I left the hospital, I read better than ever in the hospital. And I'm sure once I got home, I was able to read my own and whatnot. It's like something that I just set my target down myself. Take it down to 1. So makes me happy.
Sophia, hi. Yay! Don't look at her. Baby, watch. Advancement. Now. 20 seconds.
It will.
My major is I have another specialist that I gotta go to. My parents have been paid out.
Well, they're still kind of worried about that imaging on my lung. That's why they're going to do the second scan.
But I think like many state for 3 months. At least in Nebraska they did.
Yes, so I have. Well, and they make their mom's tired. It's just, I mean, people realize.
I got 15 years.
Which is good. It's about.
You ready? First, I don't know what you're talking about. Chapter 5, verse 1. You ready to roll? All right, if you guys want to find your ways to your spots, I'd appreciate it. Oh yeah, that's great.
You lose them? Get lost, don't you?
I know, I'm like, wait a minute.
All right, guys. Well, we have made it to chapter 5 of 1 Timothy. Sorry.
No, it's me.
So if you want to open up your Bible, that's where we're going to be. I think I said this kind of when we were getting started in, the Letters 2 series. 1 Timothy is pretty small, and so we're already almost through it. There's 6 chapters in 1 Timothy, and then we'll move on to 2 Timothy. We'll head into Titus. Did they get shut off, Sandra? Okay, cool.
I didn't hit something on
But there's been a lot of good meat that Paul's instructing Timothy and therefore instructing how to lead the church. And that's kind of what I want to focus on in as we get started in chapter 5 today. I think a lot of people could say that 1 Timothy is written specifically to Timothy, which it is indeed. Some people might take that and say, well, this is just instruction for Timothy, and kind of where I started this out before we even dove into the book is not only is it instruction for Timothy and we just leave it back there like it doesn't matter to us, but these instructions are valuable for leading and teaching the church today, right? And so what we're going to read in chapter 5, there's some pretty hard stuff, I guess you could say, that I think is really valuable for leading and teaching the church today. But you kind of got to believe that if we're going to study it, right? So even though this is written to Timothy, you can see that a lot today. This is specifically for Timothy. This is specifically for us if we want to lead an effective church, an effective leadership, especially what we're going to be talking about today. So, 1 Timothy chapter 5. I've got a lot of little things that I noticed in this chapter, so we're just going to take a small bite to start. How about that? We're going to read 2 verses.
We're not staying long.
You're not staying on? They might not have got charged all the way. Courtney, you want to just break these out for the other ones that are the easy ones? Sorry, Brenda.
I know when you don't want me to talk.
Yeah, that's why. That's it. I have a lot of things about 1 Timothy 5 that I wanted you to miss. So. Oh yeah, by the way, when you're working on your notes and you got a Miley, sometimes she likes to, separate your journal for you. I told her it's not a notebook, it's a journal. It's supposed to stay in thing. She didn't listen. It was like half a second she was gone with it. All right. So we're just going to start with the first 2 verses because I think there's a lot in these first 2 verses that honestly we got to dive into the Greek a little bit for too. So if you have the Bible Hub on your phone, or you come grab the Strong's here in a minute, that's totally fine because I got a couple of words I want to point out. 1 Timothy 5, 1 and 2. Let's read them though. This is in the ESV. Do not rebuke an older man, but encourage him as you would a father. Younger men as brothers, older women as mothers, younger women as sisters, all in purity. Do not rebuke an older man, but encourage him. And then it goes down the list of how you treat younger men, older women, younger women, all of these in purity. Now, I asked Courtney this question because I was trying to set her up yesterday. If you read those 2 verses, what is on the surface level, what do you think it means?
Be respectful.
Be respectful, because we see the older people thing, right? Older men, older women, that's the phrase that's used. Anybody have any different phraseology? Anyone reading the King James?
I got the Amplified.
Okay, let's hear the Amplified there, Greg. I want to see if one of these gets these words a little better.
Okay, chapter 5. Do not sharply censure or rebuke an older man, but entreat and plead with him as you would with a father. Treat younger men like brothers. 2. Treat older women like mothers and younger women like sisters in all purity.
All right. one of the words that got really good, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So, the first word is rebuke, and Briggs actually uses the word rebuke. My version says rebuke. Some versions do not, but if you look at the Greek word for that is, I'm going to attempt to say the Greek words today, okay? Aplixius, intent, right? It's Strong's number 1969, if you want to write it down, you look it up later. But if you look at that word rebuke, it's a pretty interesting word because it really means more like chastise, right? Don't like harsh on somebody. And so I think sometimes we read verse 1 there as, maybe we read it as don't hold them accountable, or maybe we read it as be peaceable, but I think the word rebuke and the word chastise gives a little more weight there, right? Don't rebuke them over something that's not true. Don't chastise them. Don't keep pestering them, maybe. So that was the first word that I thought was interesting. And then the second word that I think is interesting, if you look at the Greek, I think we've done a poor job of translating, and that's the word or the phrase older man. Because if you go look at the word, some of your Bibles might say elder. King James says elder. Don't rebuke an elder, or don't chastise an elder. But almost every other version that I saw says older man, and that's interesting to me because the Greek word is this word you've probably heard before called presbytero. You guys ever heard that word before in the Greek? That's the word we use for not just old person, but for elders, as in the shepherds, the pastors of our bodies, right? And the presbyter. So presbyter. And that word is used like 63 times in the New Testament to mean a shepherd, an elder, a pastor. And it's only used 3 other places to mean an old person, an old man, if you want to call it that. I can actually tell you the 3 other places here, because I left it open in my interlinear here. Luke chapter 15:25, talking about the son, his older son was in the field. His presbyteral son was in the field. 2 John 1:1, the elder to the chosen lady, meaning the older. Or 3 John 1:1, the elder, which I would say this one could be either the old person or the church elder, to the beloved Gaius. Right? So there's only 3 other times maybe outside of 1 Timothy 5 that this is ever used to mean anything but elderly church. The reason I bring that up is I think it's really weird that we've translated this as to the older man. Do not rebuke an older man.
Don't you think it's because the next verse is younger men to older women and younger women?
I do think so. I think context is a little, you want to dive into context a little more with me? I got pretty nerdy last night. Okay, I think the context is pretty important here. The next word that you see is older women. Any guess what that word might be in Greek? It is. It's the feminine version. So, presbyteros, right? So it's the feminine version of presbyteros, which I found really interesting. So that's what I tried to trick Courtney with yesterday and asked her. And I was like, so is this talking about old people, like old man, old woman, or is this talking about elders of the church? And Terry brought up a really good, interesting thing here. In the context of verses 1 and 2, it's talking about all of these different generations, I guess you could say, right? All these different generations in the church. How you treat an older man, how you treat an older woman, how you treat younger men, how you treat younger women. But in the context of 1 Timothy, what have we talked about a lot already?
Oh, roles, elders.
Roles of elders.
So this is talking about the wives of the elders.
I'm not writing a commentary here, Sandra, I don't know.
You do hero commentary all the time.
But we are going to talk about elders again in chapter 5, starting in verse 17, meaning elders, shepherds, pastors of the church. So, I find that really interesting. I'm going to let you guys wrestle with that a little bit. But what's the point here? Oh, yeah, Brenda.
What's the Greek for younger?
That's just one of them.
Neoteros,
Oh, good job, James.
as in new,
New, yeah.
Oh, like a new elder?
no, the younger women.
Yeah, the younger.
So here's what I kind of thought, and again, you guys can wrestle with me on this or you can disagree, but I just find it interesting that it's used mainly, again, 63 times versus possibly 3 times to mean elder shepherd of the church. Our call, though, is still the same. So do not rebuke, do not chastise an elder or an older person, older man, but encourage him as you would a father. Yeah, Courtney.
This is just a theory, but have we considered that maybe in this context, in this culture, it was somewhat rare to be an older person and not be in that role?
I think that's very fair. I think that's very fair, especially, I don't know, especially with what we're going to read in verse 17. We're going to talk about kind of how an elder is more of a job than I think we make it in America today. So you can go either side of that. So continue, and then we'll go to Brenda.
We can go to that.
Okay, Brenda and then Greg.
Couple of verses at the end of chapter 4 talks about Timothy having hands laid on by the presbyters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's
But
verse
it said they're
14.
presbyters and not elder. At least my version said that.
Yeah, my version says elders, but it's verse 14 is what, the end of verse 14 that Brenda is talking about here, you guys, if you want to go look.
So it's right there within the couple of verses of what.
Within the context, kind of what we're talking about. Okay, 12, where's 14? Yep, same word too. It's presbytero. So that one is definitely, what word did you say instead of elders, Brenda? You said
Presbyter.
presbyter, so they just, transliterated the word in that version. So the point that I wanted to point out was, I find it really interesting that context clues about what we've been talking about in Timothy, and the most common use case here is elders. And I mean like the role of an elder and not just the age of an elder.
How old was the church at this time?
We're talking, I think I went off the cuff and said 30 years max a couple weeks ago, right? Did I say that, or was that in Corinthians? No, that hadn't been it. That's Harold's guesstimate.
It sounded reasonable, give or take.
Yeah, I mean,
So you don't have old people, and you don't have people who've been Christians for 50 and 60 years. So somewhere in there, does it actually matter whether it's talking about older people or elders?
well, I think it puts a little bit of weight to the fact if we call it elders. So this is why I brought all that idea up, right? Okay, Courtney, go for it.
All right, I'm going to pull us out of the Greek and go big picture again.
Okay.
But the verse is talking about encouraging one another, and it's not specific only to the old men or the old women, but the young women and the young men as well, doing it in all purity. And at Bible camp this year, someone gave these statistics. They talked about a man studied workplace dynamics, and he noticed that if a boss went and spoke harshly to his employee, there would be a spike in productivity. And if he did it again a little while later, there'd be a smaller spike. But after that, it never again had any effect on workplace. However, we all know, we've all had people who are encouragers, who are Barnabases, right? They encourage us, and we would do anything for them, and because of the love that we share. Yeah, and I think that's totally applicable here. That like, you can get a little bit of a boost if you rebuke somebody, but you're gonna lose a lot more.
All right, to go with Courtney's big picture, I gotta get nerdy again, right? Because we can't just state what we want to state with this. Let's look at the word again, right? So we have rebuke is the first one, which I mean is like chastise. If you'll look at the Greek. Then we're talking about who are we actually talking about? Then what are we supposed to do? But it says, but my version says encourage. Again, kind of a weak word in the English, right? So Courtney said we're called to encourage. So if you go look that word up, I'm not going to attempt to say it. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to. It's Strong's number 3870, okay? This idea of exhort is to invoke, to implore, to call for, to entreat. And the reason that I thought that was interesting is because I think we read in our American mindset, we read encouragement or encourage, and we almost see that as permissiveness, right? To encourage you to do whatever. Permissiveness is not this word. Exhort is never the idea of what you're doing is fine, but rather to encourage you to what? Be better. I invoke you to grow. I implore you.
Doesn't chastise come with the idea of the fact that you're doing something wrong?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this isn't don't speak to them harshly, don't, treat them harshly. This is don't chastise them harshly. So that when you have to correct an older person, you need to do it in love.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And so I think that's, because we're going to dive into that in verse 19 or so in a minute. All of these are when someone's doing something wrong, and both of them are not permissive, right? If you chastise someone, you just go about telling them how they're doing things wrong incorrectly. But if you exhort, you still have to tell them they're doing things incorrectly. You have to encourage them, right? You have to implore, you have to call them, you have to entreat them to do the right thing or to grow. And we're talking about old people at the beginning, right? You're supposed to do the same with the younger men as brothers. You treat them as brothers. The younger women, or the older women as mothers, and the younger women as sisters. Yeah, right.
Isn't this really just about how to treat each other correctly? The word sincere, did I say that right?
Censure.
Well, okay, thank you. Say it again.
Censure.
Censure, okay, in the Oxford it says it's expressing severe disapproval of someone or something, especially a format statement. So, I mean, isn't it just really saying be kind to one another with love without having to really dig to the bottom of the earth?
So the first word that you just said, that's the rebuke or chastise, or I can't even say the word you're trying to say. So,
Censure.
Yeah.
so that would be
C-E-N-S-U-R-E. Censure.
that would be the wrong way to go about the same purpose, though, right? And so what you're saying is this idea of chastising is not what we're called to do, but yet helping someone be better, invoking, exhorting, imploring, calling for is important. No matter where they're at. I'm going to come to you, but I have to say this. We haven't talked about the words, right? How are we supposed to treat them? Like a father, like a mother, like a brother, like a sister. Here's why that's powerful to me. Church people are terrible at this, right? Because we're all about, oh, we're a family. You know what? I'm going to tell my dad, if he's cheating on my mom, to knock it off. And it's going to be rough like that. It's going to be serious. Okay? And my dad's going to take it from me. Why? Because I treated him like a father. My sister, I can't tattle on my sister. I could come up with some examples for my sister, right? That wouldn't be very fair. But a couple years ago, Courtney and I were talking about, all right, this is my sister. She's wrestling with life. Because of that, she's not sinning, but she's kind of like, yeah, I wonder. And Courtney and I are like, as a sister, how do we need to talk to her about that? Because we're not just going to be like, yeah, just keep on wondering, see if you fall over the line, right? So as a brother, as a mother, as a sister, as a father, we can be real with each other. We can invoke, implore, and call for betterment, but we do it in love because, Dad, I love you. And you're not going to destroy our family. Sister, Emily, I love you, and I'm not going to let you fall into the trap that I've seen lots of people fall into in sin. And so I think we read these two verses, and this is the reason I had to get all nerdy with you guys, and Courtney can have a comment. I think we read these from the American mindset of saying, we just got to be permissive and friendly. That's not what these verses say. These verses say, do not chastise someone, but rather invoke them to be better in Christ. You can argue with me on that, but that's why I gave you all the Greek words. All right, Courtney, and then Dennis.
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on where I was going. I was going to say that I think we all have something to learn from this verse, all of us, because it's so easy to fall on either wayside, where we're too harsh And it's easy to get too harsh because it's really nerve-wracking. Conflict is scary, and our lizard brain kicks in, that middle brain, and it starts making you panic, and you can get really mean and really, yeah, it happens really easy. But the other side of that is just let it be.
Mm-hmm.
You live your life, I live mine.
Yeah.
I'm not going to really interact. I'm not going to really help you be better, because yeah, I mean, there's tons to learn here from both sides, and it's like so many things in the Bible where it truly is a balance.
Neither one of those sides is right, and I think we have the disposition in our culture to be either one of those, right? To land inappropriately either side. Dennis?
The first verse there, that word censures used, some of them sharply rebuke an elder or an older man, and using that, and maybe there's another one or two somewhere. Some elders, official elders have made it, thou shalt not say anything unhappy or negative against an elder. And so here you got a guy that's 55 years old, been Christian all his life, and you got this new elder that's 38 and has been a Christian for 7 years, and the 55-year-old who's literally his elder can't say a thing about him, can't look cross-eyed at him, can't question it. That's, I think, that's the opposite end of the permissive thing, is where it becomes I got the badge, I can do anything I please, you can't even say nothing about it.
Yeah, and we use it culturally as the older man or the older woman way too, right? You can't tell me what to do, basically, because I'm older than you. Not that anybody would say that, but we kind of have that mindset in our culture sometimes, right? So both of those are toxic mindsets that we have sometimes. Greg?
I have an example of that. When I called you a couple days ago, and I said, Pastor, I'm losing it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm about to lose it. And you said, I get it, but that's not the way you want to do it.
Yeah, there you go. Good job.
Yeah. Good job, bro. Because that is what you said.
So in other words, I didn't let Greg go, I don't know what about this. I didn't let him go do it. I exhorted and encouraged him to go grow and be better.
Yeah, we sure did.
Situation.
So you made me think before I flipped.
Paul encourages Timothy as a pastor to treat the people in his congregation as members of his family. People in the ministry positions can avoid improper attitudes towards those they minister by treating them as family members. If pastors see people as they shepherd as fellow members in God's family, they will protect them and help them grow spiritually.
Yep, absolutely. So I'm going to do something a little different. This isn't how I was planning to do this, but since we're having such a good talk about dealing with the family, let's go ahead and skip. We'll come back to talking about widows. Because they're about the same thing, but I think we should do them after we talk about the rest of the elders' conversation. So let's go down to verse 17. And maybe even next week we'll have to come back and pick up verse 3. This isn't how I was going to do it, but we've had some really good discussion on this. So, on the idea of, treating each other like a family, let's focus in on the elders, on the shepherds of the church. That's just exactly what's being talked about in 17. So, 17 through 18, I'm only going to do 2 verses. Let the elders who rule well be considered worthy of double honor, especially those who labor in preaching and in teaching. For the scripture says, you shall not muzzle an ox when it treads out the grain, and the laborer deserves his wages. Jesus said that one, by the way. All right, so 17 and 18. We're popping back to the actual elders of the church for sure here. The word is still presbyteral. Okay? Do you catch anything interesting that we don't necessarily practice when we're talking about elders here?
Paid elders.
Paid elders. And it's kind of like a smack in the face, isn't it? Right? Let the elders who rule, how? Well. Interesting little qualifier there that is actually in the Greek.
what word do you have for rule?
Rule.
New American
Oh, like the
Standard
Greek
says
word?
rule.
Yeah, NIV says direct the affairs.
Yeah,
I don't know, rule sounds a little odd with all the descriptions of elders that we ever have. Shepherding and ruling doesn't sound like the same thing to me.
sure. I do think it is rule, if I remember right, in the Greek, so let me go find it.
It is.
Yeah, it is, thank you for
It's a
being quick.
verb.
It's a verb of ruling over,
To
right?
preside, to rule over, to give attention to, direct, maintain, or practice diligent.
Thank you, Jordan, because I slept since I looked at that word yesterday.
So
So.
NIV went the direct
Mm,
route.
Direct, like a director.
Okay,
Yeah.
just curious.
Which is what a shepherd does. Brian and I were talking about this the other day about, can your preacher be a shepherd? Well, absolutely, right? But the job of a shepherd is much more important because you're watching over the flock. You're guiding, you're ruling in that sense, you're directing. Not always do preachers have that job, right? Some places they do, not always. So, those who rule well, who watch over well, you could say that. Let them be considered worthy of double honor. If you were to look up this word honor, sometimes we think like, oh, good honor, elder, it means wages. It means payment. It means credit where service has been done. It's very much talking about paying, like I think Dennis said, right? About paying your elders, and that makes us uncomfortable because we don't do that. So it's interesting, right? So
Some groups do.
well,
Larger congregations do.
I've been reading this First Timothy thing, and I think that would be a challenge that we should be doing, right? Especially, who should we be paying? There's a word especially in mind, especially
Those who
Attention.
labor in the word and teaching.
who labor in the word and teaching. Yet another thing that we kind of culturally slice are probably uncomfortable with. We don't have a whole lot of preaching and teaching elders, do we? I can think of a couple of examples. Mike up in Cody, Mike Christensen, he's a preaching and teaching shepherd, right? That being said, he's trying to retire, so because he's tired of the preaching and teaching part, he just wants to do the shepherding part, which I get. And so those are the ones that not only should have double honor, but especially we should be paying them more. Why? Well, the scriptures say, "You shall not muzzle an ox when it treads out the grain." Somebody that's doing good work, give to them what they deserve. Jordan?
I was just thinking about, what are your opinions on the context of that? The preaching and teaching?
So,
Especially somebody as significant as Paul writing this letter to Timothy. This is the guy that would go to the opposing house of faith and try to convert them everywhere he went, right? Synagogue, right? And I don't think any of us do that, right? Well, what does that mean? Does it mean preaching? Obviously, it's not limited to Sunday morning, but it's our whole Christian walk.
sure.
And it's like, I personally would probably never say that I worked hard at any of that, because I have a full-time job. You know what I mean? Like, if I was working hard, I'd be doing it every day.
Well, I
Probably-
think that's
probably everywhere I went, like literally proclaiming the word of God, staying on soapbox. That's how I see it.
Yeah. All right, this is completely only Harold's commentary, because Jordan prefaced this question with, what do you think, right? Harold's commentary here is, I think the most biblical example of shepherds, whether they're preaching or teaching shepherds or not, right? Obviously, there's the two groups, is that this is now their full-time life, right? And again, in America, we tend not to think that. And I get absolutely furiously frustrated at people that have the opportunity to make, like Jordan just said, man, I gotta work all the time. I get frustrated at people that have the free opportunity to shepherd the church. And they're like, no, I'm gonna do other stuff. And so this is Harold's commentary. Harold's commentary on this is, yeah, this is a full-time gig. And then Jordan said the preaching and teaching part is that's not just Sunday. I'd say it'd be inclusive of the times we gather together as the church. But Jordan is saying making a witness out there for the servitude of Christ. Yeah, does it?
Back a little bit to the explanation of this. I think even some of the people that have put headlines in our Bibles and stuff, that
Mhm.
verse 17 on is talking about the elders per se as we normally think of leadership elders. Mine says the ones who take the lead well, elders, worthy of the double honor and stuff like that. They, like somebody said, they probably have a lot of people in their church. Evidently, there's elders that didn't take the lead too. There was old men, and then there was those that were involved in the and that was what I was actually going to say. The word generally, in most of the places, used for those who have rule and oversight, if you want to call it, or control, how's that? Are usually called episkopos, or overseers. Where the word presbyteros here is talking about old men in general, just like widows and girls and brothers and everything else we've talked about. And the ruling thing, this is one of the only places I think it is where it talks about those that, but it doesn't just say, sharply rebuke those who take a lead. Anyway, there were older men in the church evidently there, and older men who were in a leadership position. And those in the leadership position were supposed to be receiving monetary or physical reimbursement. It was not necessarily a retirement plan for all the old men.
Right. Yeah, there you go. That's a good way to distinguish it. And that's kind of what Sandra was getting us on a little bit ago. I'm trying to find where my list of all of the use cases. I invite you guys, though, on your own time, go look up that word presbytero. Find it there in 1 Timothy 5 if you want in the Strong's. But go look at all those examples and see all the different places it's used, because that's kind of what Dennis was talking about. And you'll find, again, I had to add them up, but you'll find like 50 times where it's used as like an elder. And so that was really interesting to me. So I invite you to go look, don't just take my word for that. I had it on my phone, I lost it someplace, but go dig it up.
It's 57 times.
Okay.
Elders, plural.
And then do you have old anywhere else other than 1 Timothy, like old man? I don't know how else to say that.
Well, anytime it looks like presbyteros is translated in that any conjugation, it's still saying the same thing. It's elders, elder, and elder, ancients, elder ones, or two elders. Those are the different usages of that word.
So
Then look back at chapter 3, and it's the same word.
yeah, it's the same word, and it's the same word that we're covering again here later in chapter 5. Anyway, dig through those. You can look at all the different verses. Probably not in the paperback Strongs, but in the Bible Hub Interlinear, you can click them all, and you can see the context of them, which is what I found very interesting. So, the laborer deserves his wages. Again, shaking us up on our core a little bit of what American church looks like. We have enough time to shake us up some more? We do. Okay, we got 8 minutes to shake it up a lot. Listen to what Timothy is instructed here. Because what's next is really hardcore.
You want 19?
19. Do not admit a charge against an elder, except on the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. As for those who persist in sin, rebuke them in the presence of all, so that the rest may stand in fear. In the presence of God and Christ Jesus, and of the elect angels, I charge you to keep these rules without prejudicing. Do nothing from partiality. The reason that I talk so much about who we're talking about, older guys or elders, is because this part gets really hard. And you gotta know who you're talking about. And I think we're talking about, as Dennis kind of repurposed us, we're talking about the leaders of the church here, right? The ones we should be paying, the ones who should have double honor, the ones that we should be treating as fathers. We also gotta, what? if they have a charge against them,
Send 2 or 3 witnesses, preferably at the same time, because you can't receive it if they just come one after the other. You gotta reject them without.
so here's the thing that I got from the 2 or 3, have 2 or 3 witnesses, right? You can't just go off a rumor. If you're gonna, what's the word here? A charge. If you've got a charge against an elder, you can't just go off a rumor, right? You gotta do some research. You gotta have 2 or 3 witnesses. Said, somebody told me this. I need to ask you, do you know anything about this? Somebody says, yeah, I know all about that. That's been happening. Somebody else comes up to you and says, hey, you need to watch out for this. I said, really? Because 2 other people told me that this has been happening. And they're like, yeah, it has been. Witnesses, right? Kind of some research behind it. Barb, did you have something? Okay, be careful. Option.
Sorry.
So the really important part that I took away there is you got to be sure. You can't just be going accusing charges of sin, because that's what we're talking about. Charges of sin against somebody on, especially an elder, on the basis of gossip. But, what, there in verse 20. As for those who persist in sin, rebuke them in the presence of all, so that the rest may stand in fear. Remember, this is being written from Paul to Timothy. I think the best descriptor of Timothy most people give him is Timothy the evangelist, right? He's what? He's like a localized preacher teaching to a congregation. Not shepherding over them, teaching to them. A young evangelist, right? And that's why all of these things have been tying together, Sunday morning services in class. And he is given the charge to not let sin just be okay. Especially with the ones that claim to lead the church. And what does Paul say to Timothy that he's got to do with that? Man. Write him a letter? Maybe. But then you got to get up in front of the entire church and read him that letter.
Yes.
Right? And again, we don't want to do that.
I know it has the same meaning, but NIV says publicly,
Publicly.
and somehow that, yours says
The presence of all.
presence of all, but somehow publicly just seems so much more shaming.
And I think we culturally, we get caught on the, wow, that seems really shameful. The point is not to shame them. The more powerful point is what is said right after why, right? The reason why, according to your next. So that the rest may stand in fear. Courtney.
It's really easy to be manipulated by our culture into thinking you exposing something is bringing shame to them, but let's be clear that the shame is already there. And it's like, for example, with parents, maybe that's what's coming to my brain. It's like, well, I can't say that, or that might break a relationship. And it's like the fact that you can't bring that to your parents shows that the relationship is already broken. I don't know if that made sense to y'all, but I'm saying that we can really manipulate ourselves into thinking we're doing something bad, and it's already there, it's already bad, it's just being true and honest about it.
And it's a good example because, treat them like a father and a mother is used here in verses 1 and 2 that we just read, and I think they're deeply connected. Courtney's point there is like, if there's an injustice, even if it's your father or your mother and they're abusive, you can't just stand by and say, oh yeah, you can keep living in sin because you're older than me, you wipe my butt, as they say, right? That's the thing, it's hard to tell people that they're doing wrong when they wipe your butt. The point of that is, sometimes you gotta. And what Paul is challenging Timothy is here, if they are leading the church, and they are living in sin, you got to make sure that that's true, not just a rumor. And then if it is true, you got to confront them in front of everyone publicly. Why? So that other people may stand in fear. What are we talking about standing in fear of? Fear of sin, right? Being caught up in sin themselves. Brenda?
There's an example of Paul correcting Peter in Galatians 2. It was public. It was in front of everybody. Peter was leading everybody astray, and Paul spoke right then and faced it right when it was happening.
To his face.
To his face. I would say Peter's got it rough from Jesus too, you know. Like, get behind me, Satan. When he's walking with him as an apostle, it's like, wow, that's a pretty bold thing to say to me. You know, that's how Peter's got to feel about it, but he's humbled by it. The reason why is so that people, people will be afraid of sin. And then also this other piece, verse 21, in the presence of God and Christ Jesus and of the elect angels, I charge you to keep these rules without prejudice, without partiality, doing nothing from partiality. It's interesting to me that needs to be said, because that's kind of what we've been talking about this whole time, right? You can easily fall into the fact of partiality and prejudice because they're these examples we've been using, right? Because they are my father, my parent, whatever, but more importantly in the church, because they're an elder, I can't. Think about it again from Timothy, like Terry said. He's a young evangelist, and I think he could easily think, I can't confront these elders. And Paul says, yo, Timothy, sin is sin. You don't let sin be in the church. Don't have partiality just because they're elders, just because they're older brothers, because if they're sinning, you must publicly confront that if you know it's true in the witness of 2 or 3. Bold stuff. Yes?
That partiality thing, I'm glad that's said there, because a lot of times we, as humans, period, and as Americans, we're very political. A lot of times things get down, it ain't the what of a thing, it's the who. Mm-hmm. If we don't like the guy, then anything he does is bad. If we basically like the people, we'll wink and nod and give a little grin and look the other way. Well, you know how he, what I mean, we'll make excuses for him. So that is important that he has to remind us of this partiality thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, both sides of that are dangerous, right? If we don't like the person, we're easier to say, well, you left the cookies on the counter last Wednesday. You're sinning.
He needs a good dressing down.
Okay? But if we like somebody, we'll be like, I saw you out at the strip club, but you're a good guy, so I'm not going to talk to you about that.
Wait, how did you see him?
He's a good guy.
You saw him.
Oh man, I have stories about that. I had a buddy in college that thought we should do a strip club ministry, and I was like, no, not for me, bro. Too straight for that.
He evidently didn't study the very definition of the word fornication. It's the word we get pornography from. Mm-hmm. And it basically comes from the Greek idea of unclothing oneself before another. So, if we're supposed to, God hates fornicators and all that kind of stuff, then, it's a contradiction of terms. That you can evangelize a strip club, at least on the active premises.
During an action time, right? Yeah. So anyway, sorry to take us down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So,
I can see the bunnies right now.
Yeah, I knew better. You guys got any other comments on this? Is a really hard stuff. Okay, maybe it's not as hard for you as it is for me to read this. As someone, like I said on Sunday, who is in the position of Timothy, right? Art?
The thing is, when you talk about bringing anything to rebuke them in the presence of all, the problem is you get into a pretty sticky place right there if you haven't followed the way of doing it, going to them individually, taking, other people and all that. But if you go into this that way, then you've got to understand that I'm a sinner. I am a sinner. And if I think that rebuking one person is okay, when there's 20, 30 of us that also have sin too. The problem becomes, okay, this sin is greater, so we're going to look at this sin.
Sure.
Okay, somebody else is doing it too, but we're gonna look at this one, because we wanna look at this one, but we're not gonna bother with this one.
And that's the partiality part.
Okay, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Before you take a major step and say, we're gonna kick them out, we're gonna church them, this is it, we've had enough, okay? You wanna do that, you're gonna have to do that to a lot more people than just that one, or you are doing strictly partiality on certain people. We're gonna stick it to this guy to make him an example or her an example. I always say guy because that's just the way
Yeah,
the
that's
Bible does too. But you can't do that without being partial. I mean, without doing it to every single person that has that same sin. Well, why is that sin worse than someone who told lies downtown or didn't stand up for God downtown? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It becomes a very sticky slope. And it's something that's, anything you do has to be done with love, not to shut them out of your lives. You're done. I'm done with you. I don't like you anymore. I hate you. How many times have you told a parent or a brother or anything else like that without giving them the opportunity to come back to you? This is all about getting people to come back to God. That is love. And when people cannot feel our love as a family, we've got a problem. We've got to love, y'all are my family. I don't want any of y'all. We've got the southwest corner of heaven we've got to meet at. That's what we used to always tease about because everybody was from Texas. And we'd say, meet you in the southwest corner. I mean, wherever that is.
But on that idea of love, it's like giving cash to a drug user, right?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna let you sin because we got the southwest corner of heaven,
Yeah.
right? And I mean, and then I wanted to point out there's Matthew 18. We're kind of like crossing over. That's where Barb is taking us a little bit. Yeah, Matthew 18, starting about verse 15. The process of calling someone out on their sin, if you want to call it that, right? It's a process. But I got you, Jordan, I'm sorry.
Okay.
But we got the very end of the process and the very beginning of the process. People like those middle, middle is like, well, that's way between two. But here, we're not just talking about yet another brother. We're talking about who? The ones that have higher honor. Why? Because they are worthy of the upward call of leading the church. We're talking about elders specifically here. It's a little important distinction. So Matthew 18, absolutely appropriate what we need to be doing. We shy away from the end and the beginning because they're scary, right? There will be times when we have to church discipline people because we want to bring them back because we got the southwest corner of heaven. And there will be times when we have to start the process of confronting people about sin. Why? Because we got the southwest corner of heaven. I don't want to see you lost, right? But elders are held in higher honor who have been given, what's the word here? We find it, who are worthy. This is what we're talking about right here, which is even more powerful. Okay, we're totally out of time, but John had his hand up. Go for
I
it.
just wanted to briefly touch on what Barb said. I agree with a huge chunk of that. But this specific eldership part is about, like you said, older men.
Yeah,
And those older men should be shepherding the flock.
yeah.
And that's their job. Their job is to keep them in the sheep pen, right? And that's, you got a leader that's not leading. You got a bigger problem than just the top. That's all I'm going to say is the congregation's the elder's job. And a lot of times, a lot of people haven't been in a healthy congregation with healthy eldership. Elders have a set number of things. They minister, they shepherd them, and they ask those hard questions. Are you still doing this? Are you still doing that? Because we love you. And I think it's just important to point out, where you talk about beginning and end, we're talking about middle. I'm talking about middle. And we're missing the middle. We don't have the middle here in this congregation.
Absolutely.
And that's, That's the concerning part.
Yeah.
You know, it's very usually we're gonna kick somebody out, or we're gonna get mad at this one person. And it's like, we gotta realize, we gotta have some introspection. And to Courtney's point earlier, the idea of a seared conscience, I always keep bumping this topic. We're dealing with somebody that's so enamored with their sin that they don't feel guilty about sinning anymore, right? This isn't like somebody told a rumor once. It's like you're addicted to pornography. You're a drunk. You're on drugs, right? You're so convoluted, the wool's so far pulled over your eyes, you won't even come confess the sin. Right?
Yeah.
No guilt.
And that's what I'm saying, if you only do the end, you're in big trouble, right? If you're too scared to even confront sin.
And you can't hate your brother.
Yeah.
You can't hate your brother, you're not Christian. You have to love them, even in their sin. And sometimes you have to protect the flock.
Yeah, and that's why I love the where we started. That's why I tied these two together. Is like you gotta treat them like a father, a mother, a sister, a brother. And I hope nobody comes to me and says, no, you know, I love my sister in the way that I hope, you know, I shouldn't use sister. I love my, you know, my brother in the way that you know, like, yeah, he gets drunk and he drives home, and you know that's fine. You mean you're okay with him killing the family and himself because he lived in sin? No, we got to be brave enough to confront it. But at the same time, that Jordan's pointing out, if he's a brother, we don't just kick him out right away. We say, yo, brother, you're doing this. And then he continues, and we bring some more people and say, brother, you're still doing this. And he says, I don't care. And then we church discipline someone. The spirit of either, and I'm out of time, Courtney. Like, I was out of time 10 minutes ago.
I have like 1 sentence.
Hurry, go for it.
Well, just vulnerable. Here's an open invitation. If you see me doing something wrong, please come talk to me. Please.
Yeah.
I'll be more than happy.
It's not a joke, though. It's not a joke, because people get so bent out of shape and they never talk to you.
Do those, does the people that are gonna be in the southwest corner, they only come from the southeast United States?
You also got it too, man.
Oh, I'm sure I can. I just sent it all to text.
It's a miracle that I got the box. She's also not crying. She never once cried. I was like, what is happening right now? I'm so happy for you. So I was like, this is like a miracle. We can't like, and then after that, I was like, don't look at your mom because I don't want you to start crying. Yeah. And all this progress.
Morning.